That's fair. Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm going to say because I have a hard time standing up for a long time. I would prefer to just get a little more comfortable. I was just saying that I love this setup because I've done talks at places where, oh my God, the light was in my face. It was a huge stage. I was like, oh, it's very stressful. So I actually love this small setup. It's great. So yeah, thanks for coming to my talk. I missed the one last year and I was super bummed. So this time I was like, oh man, I'm going to come to this one. So I was very excited to be part of it, especially the speaking team as well. My name is Fran. I am a senior site reliability engineering manager at Arista Networks. We are the team that own, operate, do all the fun stuff that I think everybody knows about for our flagship cloud service called CBAS. Some of my teammates are actually here to cheer me on today. So thank you so much. And I stumbled upon SRE, I think probably just like most other folks out there, because it's not a discipline that's taught in any programs that I've seen at least. And I instantly I ran into it because somebody actually gave me the tome, the big Google SRE book thing. And then I instantly really fell in love with how it marries so many different things together, right? The technical rigor, architecture, systems thinking, resiliency engineering, incident management, operation, all these different things. And it really approaches service and system management, drawing a lot of other safety ideas from other disciplines and marrying with software, right? Because like software, I think it's like my pure humble opinion. Yeah, we talk a lot about how to build it, but not so much about okay, once it's out there, what about the operations? What about the fires that can happen? But in addition to that, I really love SRE in the fact that it also talks a lot about just the human side of the cost of operating systems, right? And this holistic view is what's really required to run like the ever-increasing complex software and things that can go wrong. And let's not even talk about security, because that's a whole other field. But making sure all those things happen and able to run and provide services, but not at the expense of human costs. Somebody waking up at 2 a.m. every morning, that's basically like unacceptable in the SRE world, right? And I really love that approach and the chance to look at things in a way that also talks about the people aspect. We talk a lot about technical today, so this one's going to be a little bit more about the people. So inspiration for this talk. We've all been here before when something's on fire. Oh, as I was putting together this slide, I realized that, so the author Casey Green, who actually did, this set of comics, we're all aware of the other version of this, where it says, this is fine, and there's a background. And he apparently evolved this after time with this one. I was like, oh, it so nails what usually happens. When we're in an incident, there's sweaty palms, and there's like mild panic to just straight on panic. So yeah, I just thought it was so funny because it's nails. I don't have to say much. It just nails the emotion side of this. But we also know that moment when there's like this one SRE. For the purpose of today, I'm gonna call him the mythical SRE, joins this call, the war room. And then there's like almost like a visible tension drop. It's the hero has entered the room. That kind of moment happens. And I think it's so interesting for so many different reasons, because there's like a part of us that I think all want to become this sort of person, to some extent, or at least feel that invincible about when there's something going really bad and it's, oh yeah, I have this in control. And again, there is a sort of this like the sheen of this sort of mythical hero that kind of happens. Firstly, it's not a good thing to celebrate heroism all the time, right? Because this is a very brutal concept. And I would even argue that the repeated need for acts of heroism, like something is going wrong, like outside the incident, in both either the technical design and also or in the non-technical processes or organizational structure and all those things. And when we're having a fire, nobody's responding in a safe, contained environment. In fact, if we're dealing with a brand new novel situation, it's an incident for a reason. If it wasn't novel, we probably would have had this problem in the first place, right? It would have been either automatically solved or something else would have happened. So what are people feeling in an incident like this? I think it's a couple of different things. Sorry, there's a lot of different things, but top few things I want to bring up, which is like just general fear that people feel when there is this panic happening. There's 4 things here. There's fear of the unknown, of the thing that's happening. Maybe we're not quite sure from the dashboards and all the data around us exactly where the problem is. There is a very human reaction of fear of failing. So like failing to find what the problem is and to resolve the problem. And this fear of failure has nothing, it's not technical, but it's a very painful emotion to have. It like really hurts the ego on the inside. Then there is the fear of loss of control. As the incident just gets prolonged, then there is that very human reaction as well. Compounded with other things like not having the right response tools, emotional or technical, or literally like tools that in an arsenal. So you have these individuals that seemingly mythically seem to have the answers and be in control when others might not necessarily be in a warmer situation. And I think it's interesting because it's not like these individuals are robots. They have emotions. They feel fear just like everybody else. But what's particularly different about them is that they are very resilient to stressful situations. And they are usually armed with a lot of very different types of skills and also mindset that help them feel they're in control of whatever is going on. And again, I would say just myths around them cannot be further from the truth. They're not mythical. They're not heroes either. Actually, I would say in some ways, it's like insulting to these people because they've actually worked really hard to get really good at being this resilient and dealing with situation. Yeah. Sorry, was that a question? Oh, okay, yeah. Please feel free to interrupt me. I love this. It's small setting, but and then and again, this is, I think, or at least in other SRE managers out there and teams that I've talked to, like, it's a perennial problem in building like potentially high stress, very fast incident response teams that have to react very quickly. And it's not a unique to any organization. It's a perennial problem for any teams that are in this position. And especially when success often is defined by not just being able to mitigate and close an incident, but I would actually even say that's the metrics that most people look, MTTR, all these things. I want to add on top of that, right? The success criteria should be, we close it, but also did the people come out of it psychologically unscathed? Right? So these individuals, just going back to these sort of mythical SREs, I like to call it, I think there's 4 things about them. Obviously, they're very complex, but if we were to pick up 4 big common qualities, adaptability. Can-do attitude is very similar to adaptability by making a conscious choice to split it out in this conversation. Trust, very big topic, and pretty cut and dry response tools, but we'll get into that in a little bit second. But before we get more into details, I want to talk about just why should we care, especially if you're in a management or leadership situation. Why should we care about psychological aspect or any of this stuff, right? Like at the end of the day, you could really argue, it's part of the business, not part of the business metrics or some other reason, insert some other reason, right? I think we should care because emotional health, psychological, incident response, all those things, and the amount of fear in those situations is a risk. And it is risk to the business, the product, literally a risk to how well is your team doing. Insert endless detrimental effects of prolonged fear in any human being. And I think in business, we like to talk a lot about risk mitigations, right? Things that can go wrong in business decisions or product decisions or whatever. I think this should be controlling fear, I think, and having a strategy for it should be part of the risk mitigation strategy, the overall. And we're all SREs, and mitigating known and unknown risks is bread and butter. We're really good at this. Yeah, I mean, I certainly care a lot about it, but I hope everybody also takes it quite seriously. So yeah, going back to the 4 qualities I mentioned before, I think it's worth mentioning that I don't actually see any of these as like latent talent. These are not dependent on, it might be boosted by someone's natural inclination, their personalities, or a lot of things that can go into background. But I think it's truly possible for every SRE to become that quote unquote mythical SRE. It can be trained, it can be taught as well. But yeah, definitely not just depending on like their talent, like kind of like musical talent and stuff like that. So focusing on the very first one, adaptability. It's definitely a skill that can be trained. Again, I'll talk about can do, which is different from this. Adaptability, in my mind, breaks into 3 things: critical thinking, decision-making skills, some level of confidence. I think these are all skilled. Yes, confidence, I consider a skill in this context. And you definitely train critical thinking and decision-making. And in fact, that's the only effective way to scale out a service, a product, or even a team. Because if your strategy for having a team be able to adapt to a situation is by prevention, that will never scale. There's no way to prevent every scenario. There's too many situations, too many permutations of things that can happen. You can increase overall reliability of a team adapting to a situation by increasing the ability to respond and understand a situation. So in an incident, in a war room, let's say, I actually like to intentionally ask, and I ask these sort of questions as a prompting questions for a very specific reasons. So I ask, what do you know in this moment? And I ask people to list it. And I ask people, what do you not know? And hence can be considered as risks in this current incident. And I ask them to also categorize, is this a big risk? Is this a small risk? Is this something we could toss out entirely, ignore for this fire that we're having? And I like to ask this because usually in an instant when there's a lot of panic, people are doing oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And there's all this sort of very hazy confusion reaction. But when you kind of get people into what I like to call listing mode, it's taking the brain out of that in very highly emotional panic mode into something a little bit more logical and analytical. And it's easier to control emotion by almost doing 1 + 1 kind of math rather than, oh, I don't know what's happening. So I intentionally ask these prompting questions, have people even write it down, or just it could be even verbal. It doesn't really matter whether it's written down or not, but to, again, try to bring people back to, okay, let's think critically about this rather than just all over the place. And I have people discuss this out loud, highly encourage people. It's a very Socratic method of doing things, but really just ask people on the call, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And it's awkward at first if it's not the baked in culture of your team already. And there's, again, personalities, right? Some people just prefer to be quiet. Some people like to be a little bit more outgoing. But setting that culture up front about it is okay to share ideas and it's okay to be wrong is very important. But it's more important that you're actually saying things, and then as a team, we figure out, okay, how do we actually approach a problem? And I would actually say, if you're especially in management or a leadership position, you know where everybody's comfort levels are generally, or I hope you do. And I also hope that visually, okay, if people are over in various different kind of comfort levels, where do you need everybody to be at? Maybe this mythical SRE is over here, and maybe you want everybody to get to that level. Visually think about that so that you can chart a course on this person struggles with this particular topic or this part of the system. Okay, I know what the gap is. I need to bring it up like this. And having that really visual map, at least in my experience, is very helpful. Out of incident situations, so out of a war room, I think it's very useful to also have team members regularly present architecture diagrams and talk about this is how things work, but at a more higher level of how different pieces put together. And the reason, at least in my team, we especially allocate time for this in team gatherings and meetings and stuff, because if you understand the bigger picture, going from the big to the detail, oh, this place in the code where I need to find, it's easy. Going from the nitty gritty to the bigger picture, really hard to do, especially when you're stressed out. Again, allocating a little bit of time, but intentionally also focusing on the big picture when you're not panicking, so that you're armed with that kind of, I know when this incident's happening, generally probably the systems are in play. Okay, now let's drill into that. Now it goes back to even the listing that I talked about earlier. It's a little bit to go that way than the other way around. And then more cut and dry tools that we can use in incident response training, all in the name of adaptability. Wheel of misfortune, this very well-known practice with SRE teams, right? So you have very dedicated, you take your old incident, you replay what happened, have somebody on the keyboard, and then really practice it live in a non-incident setting. What I think is also fun is taking some public postmortems as well, and then trying those out in a wheel of misfortune scenario. But again, allocating some time for that. There's lots of very well-known literature on how to run well-planned wheel of misfortune exercises. Again, that's there as a tool, in my opinion. And maybe even outside of such settings, in team building activities, specifically focusing on puzzle solving. So together, again, very intentional decisions on how to get the team to think together so that when they're in an incident together, they can help each other adapt to a problem. And I would even encourage, and it's something that my team does weekly, they have even a standing meeting. They just call it debugging hour. And they just take a problem and just look at it together for an hour. And it's an intentional business choice as well, right? Because there's an hour or several hours just being spent doing that. But I think it's very critical to allocate time for that, right? So scheduling some of that is really important as well. I'm sorry. Before I go on, speaking of incident response training, I would say this is the moment I want to ask, do you have one? And no shame if you don't have one, because again, all of this comes at a cost, right? Time cost, literal cost of setting them up. But do you have one? And then maybe if you don't have an established practice of incident response training, maybe the next action that can be considered is building one. And it doesn't have to be like as aggressive as like once a week or anything like that. Maybe at least once a quarter to start with, right? And then once a month, and then once a week. And once it becomes a culture and repetitive exercise, it's easier to, one, argue for the value of it as well. To anybody in upper management, anybody that cares. But also for your team to understand it as, oh, this is part of just what we do, rather than like one-off random event that we had. Number two, very important, just what is the goals of training? Like it should not be just a checkbox exercise. We did it one time this year, great. No, what was the outcome you wanted out of that? What was the specific areas or systems you wanted the team to learn and understand? Very important. This one's a little bit tricky, but who is part of the training, at least in my opinion, is very important. And worse is a question of who gets to participate in the training due to lack of time or other constraints. Hard to find the right answers for this, but at least questions should be there somewhere. And related, again, are you making the hard calls and decisions to allocate enough time for these trainings? Very hard thing to decide on, but one of the things that should be done. Okay, going back to the 4 things I can do, like I mentioned before, it is a mindset aspect of adaptability. It is very similar, but basically the 2 sides of the same coin. But I want to separate them out because the can-do mindset only really comes with being comfortable with failing a lot and trying a lot. And where do you get that from? Oh yeah, that incident training we just talked about. It's in being comfortable with saying the wrong answers and being able to roll that back with, okay, that's not right because this other the information I have. But again, if people have this generally, I can solve this mindset, it's easier to not panic because your baseline is already, I know eventually I'll be able to solve this, rather than, I don't know what's going on. One's very different attitude from the other. But again, mindset still can be trained, but a little bit different than a hard skill to be built. Trust, very broad topic, but it is a mindset that I think also can be trained, culture that can be built. But I want to talk about it in 2 aspects. So there's trust in the team, so individual, and their trust in everybody around them, and also trust in themselves. And then trust, huge part of any organization's culture, right? And it takes a long time to build correctly. And so again, I think, especially this is not something, in my opinion, cannot be done in like a quarter. It's like a year at least plus sort of thing. But yeah, I like to reinforce with my team verbally, and it can be a little bit repetitive sometimes. But I like to reinforce that first and foremost, we trust in our teammates to make right decisions. We are not in competition with each other, especially as an SRE in the same team. We're not competing. We're there to help each other. And I literally say it might feel a little bit on the nose a little bit, but it is worth saying out loud so that you just set it as a standard. I also like to verbally reinforce that it is okay not to know, right? But it's so not okay to stay stuck because you're not asking questions. Right? So I also just reinforce that very out loud so that I'd rather have people ask a ton of questions that like all of us don't have an answer to rather than a silent room. But for that to happen though, you need trust in everybody that I can ask the stupid questions, but other people will accept it. So that's a trust in itself. And this is done as a team, but also at the individual level. I like to reinforce with people, it is to acknowledge actually that things can go out of control. It is not your fault that things have gone out of control. It's not the fault of anybody that we have an incident. It is okay to screw up. SLAs are not 100% for a reason. Many reasons, but this is one of the reasons, right? And human response and like how fast we type away at 3 a.m. in the morning responding to a pager is not what's supposed to guarantee an uptime and reliability of a system. So it's okay to make mistakes. And what we should rather focus on is systemically changing architectures, improving monitoring, what have you, to guarantee a sustainable reliability. It is not sustainable to throw people at the problem. And again, constantly reminding people we do not blame others for something going wrong. And we've all been there where like incident and somebody actually made it worse because they did something. That happens. It totally happens. And in fact, the fact that those changes were allowed to happen in the first place. It could be a configuration one going back to that, or a design twist or whatever. It was allowed to happen by design, right? So that's what we should focus on, not the fact that somebody did it, right? And going to the trust in oneself, I really like to reinforce with people, especially in like my regular meetings with them, that we all make decisions based on what we know at that moment in the limited time that we have in an incident, and we do the best we can. And that is okay, right? Don't beat yourself up over the fact that something went wrong. It can go wrong. And the only thing that matters is that if we know more information later, or if we actually improve monitoring, if we can see things, debug things faster next time, then let's make sure we make faster, better decisions next time as a whole, but it is not your fault. So trust in your judgment on what you know at the moment. And that's a good thing. And I think just generally other things like, I know there's lots of ways to talk about postmortems. I know postmortem is a bit of a type of word now, but incident reviews, postmortems, what have you, openly allocating time, either in a big kind of setting, team meeting setting, or allocating like set number of hours to review them internally, and making that the norm as well. So making it comfortable with everybody that something went wrong, XYZ people responded to it. We logged the things that they did, which is the point of the postmortem. And again, we keep talking about it openly to encourage, look, it's not this one person's fault. It's just more of a historically what actually happened. And that openness is what creates trust rather than hiding the details. Because I've seen that happen too, where it's, oh, something went wrong. We're just going to not talk about what this team did or this person did. I don't think that's the right way to approach, or definitely not the right way to build trust. And I think, again, this is, I think, probably the simplest one out of the 4. Intentional investment in building new tools, maintaining dashboards. Actually, you need to have time for them as well. Observability, great. There's a lot of tools. How are you going to integrate that with your team? You need to actually train them to be able to use it. That takes time, but otherwise, it's just a tool. It's just a thing that's there. If you don't know how to use it when there is a stressful situation, it's entirely useless. So again, having that intentional time to build, maintain, know what tools exist, also plus to train with them. And I would say, again, if you're in a leadership position, it is totally your responsibility to justify this as a business cost that is worthwhile. And then defending the investment to any relevant stakeholders that exist. And there's a lot of AI copilot tools out there, even SRE AI agents. I think those things are the right approach, actually, to help reduce stress. If they can help us deal with an incident faster, easier, with less stress, I think those are great. Like, I think those should be fully embraced with SRE teams to improve our future with things that can go wrong. It's pretty much a guarantee that we're always going to have incidents. The last part that I talked about with the tools and justifying the investments there, to me, it's like the difference between giving your team like a little match to look in the dark versus giving them a full headlamp and like a giant spotlight to look at problems so that their job is easier. And as I was thinking of that analogy, I was thinking of the scene from the Batman movie, if you've seen the latest one. There's like the scene where Batman just goes out with this like, little torchlight and trying to lead people out of this flooded stadium. So like, what about your own role, especially as a team lead, management, leadership in an incident situation? I think keeping in control of fear means also having a clear leader in any situation to keep calm first and keep some level of order in an incident. And again, that could be you, right? It's a hard job. You will struggle with your own emotional struggles of, oh my God, something's going wrong. I'm going to have to explain this to higher ups or whatever. Our mind goes there. But it is also, I think, again, the job of the leader and that doesn't have to be manager either, right? But especially if you're a manager, it definitely should mean you, to take care of your team first, and then you get to relax, right? You don't need to know everything as a leader in a situation. You don't need to have all the solutions either. You don't even need to resolve the incident. But it's certainly your job to maintain, especially on a war room, how long has it been going on? Keep an eye on how tired everybody is. And you are the de facto incident commander, right? Until somebody else comes along that maybe has more context, or maybe you yourself is so tired that you need to actually take a break. I really deeply believe in the toughest calls, managers should be there. The leadership should be there to show people that we are in the thick with them, lead from the front. Yes, it's ugly, but we're all here together, right? And that also helps manage that fear, right? Because some of that fear goes to, oh my God, I'm gonna have to explain this to somebody else later. No, just remove that entirely. If the manager's already there, great. That already is solved, right? For the people that's trying to deal with the situation. And having your teams back, especially when things are going wrong, and not blaming them for something going wrong. I am very strongly opinion that if we have an incident, I own it as a manager. It is my responsibility something went wrong, not the team. The team should focus on how do we improve it for the next time. And if things go well, including things like incidents being resolved really quickly, we celebrate the people. I don't take credit for it. And again, all of us together trying to work on all the 4 things I talked about together and continuously investing it over time. That's really the hard part, right? It's maintaining and sustaining it over time. And speaking of celebrating, everybody has a role to play. All your team members, SRE team, DevOps team, COD operations team, everybody has a role to play. Everybody's good at something too that other people are not. So celebrate unique qualities of SREs or any team members involved. Maybe celebrate unique qualities that you might have as a leadership position as well. And how all those different unique qualities fit together also increase the success of us being able to close incidents. But I would also say, going all the way back to where we started for this talk, please continue to celebrate your mythical SREs because they got there for a reason. And through a lot of discipline, oftentimes, a lot of practice banging their heads against a fire, trying to solve a problem. And that part definitely should be celebrated and respected. But while just not being seen impossible by other people that would also equally like to get that battle hardened. And thanks for coming to my talk. And there's 2 of my team members here. Thanks for cheering me on today. And yeah, thanks for coming to my talk today. Well over time, I think. Any questions by any chance?
Yes, I've got it. It's more of a comment. First of all, congratulations. This is fantastic. And I really admire that the style of leadership you're trying to communicate. I come from both a technical systems building and SRE and an athletic career to the very top of the world. And so all this is very close to my heart. This is how you build a team.
Yeah.
It's 4 people, 8 people, it doesn't matter. This is what happens under fire, under stress. And I would love to geek out with you offline afterwards and some of the tricks of the trade. But what I want to encourage you or us as a group is actually to take that concept of fear and push past it. So right now we've talked about being relaxed and being fearful. And there's a third state. And another way to say it is, in the moment, am I crumbling under the stress? Am I just managing under that stress? Or am I actually thriving in that stress?
Absolutely.
And that's the mythical SRE that you're talking about. But you're absolutely right. Like, we can all get there, right? We know what the tools are. Like, we can shepherd every single person into that state of thriving. And it's using fuel as a rocket. It's like, right now, under stress, I may feel terrible. My gut's collapsing, like everything about, like, my body's trying to fight the situation, react it, and get me out of it. But I know that's fuel. And if I can trust that fuel and relax into it, then magic comes the other side.
Yeah, it's like that, almost like a adrenaline sort of ish, but also if there's too much of it, then it becomes a challenge. So keeping it, but I love the way you said the push pass through. So some of that also has to be belief that you can do it, right? But again, this is so interesting because again, you're never taught any of this. Like, if you're software engineering, when are you ever taught, your thing might actually break in production, and then you might have that moment where your whole weekend is just crying. Like nobody talks about this, right? It's almost like a life skill to build. It's hard. It's really hard, right? And I really think, kind of going back to your, especially sports teams, especially where you really need to coordinate with each other to actually be successful. I just don't think we talk about this enough. We talk a whole lot about, it would be nice if we had better tools. Okay, but what about the people that need to use the tools and not crumble under the stress, like you said, in the moment, and then just, and that's a very human. I think we can have all the AI agents. It will help us actually, but not remove that human reaction, which is very normal. Actually, if the AI magically solves the emotional part, I'm all game for it. That would be magical. I don't know how that would happen, but sure, they have. So, and I have also seen the blame situation happen. It's very tragic. I don't want to say sad. Very tragic. You could have such a different outcome. And it's the difference between, like I said, crying on a weekend versus, you know what? I need to lay down because that was stressful, but let's talk about over that weekend what we can do better, and that hope and energy, right? And that's important. But yeah, I wish more people talked about it, but that's not talking about it today. Am I out of time? Any other thoughts? Similar experiences, perhaps?
No, it's nice to see it put to words like you were saying, because I have been that mythical SRE.
Right.
And then people ask me, how do you do that? I don't know. I didn't intentionally become that way. It just happened through my career, but now I have words to put to it. I can help my team.
You're welcome to take it.
I'm going to send this talk to my engineering leadership. So
There's also just, especially when you have newer graduates join a team. Oh man, it's like a crucible experience. Like they really have to trial by fire. They have this psychologically scathing moment, and then you see the expression on them. Oh man, that was really, that could have gotten better. So like yourself, you don't really know how you got there, but I'm sure you also just dealt with a lot of incidents and fires constantly. And I'm sure there was also like you could probably say you probably had lots of time where you were awake at God knows what time. And yeah, and then why do we need to stay awake at 2 a.m. dealing with a pager and a fire? Like none of us should be doing that. Like our quality of life does matter. And because, you know why? Because if we're always doing that sort of firefighting and just having not a great time, it shows up in the systems that we run, the things we build. It gets crappier over time, right? Bad decision making. Number one contribution to that, being tired. So again, and it's such a insidious cycle. And then again, the justification to whichever stakeholders you have, very hard conversation to have. Obviously requires also the right years up above as well. But I think, like, for example, like it is my job to fight for it. Right? I'm not going to chicken out and say, oh, my team needs at least like this percentage amount of time to spend on training. It is critical to our job. And if somebody says, that's too much, it is my job to fight for it. And be like, I mean, it's needed because X, Y, Z. I need to be able to argue for it. And I think and that's not comfortable for me either, but it needs to be done so that the whole system as a whole, like the people system, I guess, works. And I think the conversations I had with stakeholders could have been worse, but it also wasn't easy. But also if you set a standard for, look, this is the minimum we need to do at minimum, at minimum, not the minimum, then people also get used to it. That's the culture part. You set a standard. This is what absolutely we need to invest in. So anyway, I think I'm fully out of time. Thank you so much for coming. And then,